Did you ever hear the tragedy of Gelorum the drone?
No.
I thought not. It's not a story the AcceleRacers would tell you.
Villains. Often overshadowed by the protagonists. Often overlooked by us viewers, and often they are underdeveloped by writers. Sometimes villains are just seen as a way to move the plot forward or even start the plot, because in most cases, without the villain, then there is no plot. If there is no villain, then our characters can't face an external hardship from another force with motivation to be that force. Without the villain, then there is no one we want to defeat, and then there is no one to beat. Sometimes they are seen as a means to an end and nothing more than that, which leads to their character, their motivations, and their story being underutilized and meaningless. Sometimes what makes a good villain is their own origin story. What they are like, why they are like that, and how. Sometimes if we can sympathize with a villain, if we can understand their background, we can then understand why they are so ruthless, and why they hate someone else so much, and even want them to win instead of the protagonist. Sometimes these villains are called sympathetic villains. Sympathetic villains are a different breed and have sprouted in the last decade, shaking everyone's interpretations and ideals in favor of those villains. Some of these villains are like Thanos from the MCU, Ra's al Ghul from the Batman trilogy, Raul from Skyfall, hell, even the sharks from Jaws. It's only recently that people have talked about sympathetic villains and really gone to appreciate their backstories. But there's also one in our favourite series, AcceleRacers. What is her name? Her name is Gelorum. Gelorum is something else. Gelorum is often overlooked within this series, and I don't think the majority of people understand Gelorum nor her character. Most people looking at Gelorum would just see her as a typical villain. But it's just a kid show. It's not that deep, bro. You watch this show too much. Wrong. How would you feel if your parents abandoned you because you weren't good enough? How would you feel if you dedicated your life to impress your parents, and then they said you weren't good enough? How would you feel if you dedicated your life to impress your parents, and then they said you didn't do it right? And not only that, they disowned you and cast you out of their house, leaving you with nothing. Leaving you with no love, no figures, no one to look up to, and no support. You would feel broken. You would feel a mix of emotions: anger, rage, depression, and insecurity. And instead of your parents teaching you what to do, nurturing you, they left you to your own devices, simply because they didn't like what you did. This is the story of Gelorum. The AcceleRacers abandoned Gelorum because they didn't like how she raced. In this way, the AcceleRacers are ignorant to different driving methods, and even though Gelorum could have potentially hurt the other drivers, then what about the racing realms that the AcceleRacers created? Gelorum was programmed to win. Gelorum was programmed to race. Gelorum was programmed to win at racing. Her personality, her character, her purpose was dedicated to winning a race at any cost, in which she succeeded, and the AcceleRacers cast her out and condemned her. Gelorum, after being cast out, almost had nothing. But what she did have was her programming. Programming that makes her want to race. All she had was racing, which is why she wanted to finish the realms, race an AcceleRacers, prove them wrong, and kill them in her perspective. But she also had hate. Hate for the AcceleRacers for leaving her, even though she did what she was programmed to do. Hate for the humans that they were chosen for the realms and potentially race the AcceleRacers. But she had to wait. She had to wait hundreds of years, maybe even thousands. If she didn't power down, if she didn't hibernate, she must have gone insane. This is why I like Gelorum, not only for her looks, but as a villain. I can put myself in her shoes and understand why the way she is and why she's doing it. So she comes up with a plan. Plans to race the Accelerons, kill them, and kill the humans. She wants to kill everyone she hates and prove the Accelerons wrong. She kills 2 birds with 1 stone. And after all this, after waiting for so long, after following her programming and finally reaching the Accelerons who are basically her parents, her creators, what happens? She gets thrown into an abyss of nothingness. She gets thrown into the side, cast out yet again to be forgotten and abandoned by the Accelerons. Again, she did what she was programmed to do, and the Accelerons cast her out simply because their ideals of driving didn't conform to her ideals of driving. A lot can be said today about this, even in the current political environment. Gelorum, after everything, screams in eternal rage because again she got rejected by her creators. Her creators who failed to program her correctly. Her creators who failed to teach her, who failed to love her and nurture her. Her creators who created her to be the monster she is. And so she is screaming in pain, in hatred, because she has nothing left. And that is the tragedy of Gelorum.